right, it's 7 o'clock and it looks like we have everybody, so I call this meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Mayor, can you please take a roll call attendance?
Councilmember Henry.
Present.
Councilmember Mock.
Present.
Councilmember Sayre.
Present.
Councilmember McKnight.
Present.
Mayor Johnson.
Present. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning into tonight's meeting. We value our residents and community members, and we want to make sure that everyone who wants to participate and provide community input can do so. This meeting is available live via the city's website by clicking on the video link under upcoming meetings on the homepage at cityofcarver.com. Or you can join remotely via Zoom conferencing services and provide input. Information related to joining the Zoom conferencing services can be found on the city's website or the agenda for this meeting. We ask that anyone wishing to address the council wait to be recognized by the mayor, be respectful, wait for your turn to speak, and don't speak over one another. Callers will still need to provide their names and addresses for the record. All right, item number 3. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
We have a motion by Councilmember Henry.
I'll second.
I heard Joy first and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry.
Aye.
Councilmember Mock.
Aye.
Councilmember Sayre.
Aye.
Councilmember McKnight.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. All right, motion passes. All right, we do have someone here tonight in council chambers joining us for the community comment. Mr. Fahey, come on up.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members and staff. I'm excited about the city of Carver and the current commissioner race in District 5. My name is John Fahey. It's great to see the city of Carver growing with a planned strategic vision. I currently serve on the county CDA, and we have enjoyed the partnership with the city and its senior and multi-family apartments project. And the CDA is here to help with the CARES Act, involving the small business funding and the housing assistance program. As we look forward, I feel it is critical to have a strategic working relationship between the cities, the county, and also the county. As a commissioner candidate, we need someone with the leadership skills, the experience, and education, and has served in the county at multiple levels. I feel I have checked all of those boxes. The Carver Way, we are focused on solutions to support the shared vision. As a former mayor, I feel this is very critical. Thank you for allowing me to address this evening in public comment.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to our meeting. Appreciate it. All right, let's see. We don't have, under presentations and reports, item 5.1, we have Ms. Lisa Sales-Adams, our new superintendent for District 112. Lisa, I'm going to just have council go around the horn and do introductions, if that's okay. I'm Courtney, I'm the mayor. We've had a couple of meetings together. We know each other. Let's see. Lori, you're off of mute. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name's Lori Sayre. I've been on the council for 2 years, and I have a 8th grader at Pioneer Ridge Middle School, and then I have an 11th grader at Chaska High School. Hello.
Glenn, do you want to go next?
Glenn Henry, City Council for 12 years.
Hi, Glenn.
And how are you today?
Good, thank you.
Welcome to council.
Joy, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Joy McKnight. I have been on the city council for 2 years as well. I have a 4th grader at East Union Elementary.
Hi, Joy.
Hi.
And last but not least, Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Mock, and I've been on the council for about 4 years, I don't have any kids in the district, but I do have my puppy, and we live down here in downtown Carver. So it's very nice to meet you and welcome.
Hi, Christy. Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for the welcome.
And Lisa, I don't know, oh, it looks like do you have a presentation? Do you want me just to hand it over to you?
Yeah, so actually Mr. Merrick is gonna drive the slide deck for me, so I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. While he's getting that ready, Council, I did email Ms. Sales Adams and told her about my love for playing Two Truths and a Lie. So maybe while he's getting that ready, Lisa, are you comfortable doing that?
I am. I'm actually ready.
Okay. Do you want to have at it?
Yes. So, Two Truths and a Lie. So first of all, I just want to say good evening, Mayor Johnson and council members and staff. So thank you for inviting me to meet you and share this evening. So I will start with my Two Truths and a Lie. First one, I began volunteering in local politics during the early 80s. Second one, I ran track in high school. And then third, I am known for making a delicious chocolate cake.
All right, so we're going to do a show of hands as to which one we think is the lie. So everybody can participate.
Okay, so I can't see everybody.
Okay, so it looks like it's between two. My vote is for number 3. Oh, it's split between 2 and 3. Which
All
one's
right.
the lie?
I did not run track in high school.
Okay.
I tried out. I'm like, not for me. And I didn't do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for playing along. I think it's a good way of introducing people, and we get a little bit of insight into their personality, and now we can look forward to chocolate cake potentially someday.
Sure. I really thought you all picked number 1 though, but okay. So just a little bit about me. I've already shared with Mayor Johnson that my aunt was formerly the mayor of Minneapolis. So I started door knocking and volunteering. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. So out there trying to meet people and share information. But again, thank you for having me. I'm Lisa Sales Adams. I am the new superintendent for Eastern Carver County. Just a little bit about me. I have more than 25 years of experience in public education. I started off as a middle school teacher, and I looped for 3 years. If you ever had a teacher that's looped with your children, that teacher would stay with those students for 3 years. So I'm just really blessed by having strong relationships with my students. I've also been a principal at all levels. I've been an elementary principal, middle school principal, high school and alternative high school principal. And I've been an assistant superintendent in 2 districts. So for about 5 years with St. Paul Public Schools, and then most recently with North St. Paul Maplewood Oakdale School District. And I am very pleased to be the superintendent in Eastern Carver County. With this new slide, one thing that you'll hear us say oftentimes, stronger together. We all know that our country, our state, and our world, we are currently in a pandemic, and we are being asked to do things that are very challenging, but we are certainly up to the task. So one thing that we say in our district is stronger together. So it has been an amazing journey leading up to the start of the school year. So we've had all hands on deck. Staff have been working tirelessly throughout the spring, summer, and fall leading up to the start of school on September 8th. So super excited. We started off really strong, but getting ready to make those decisions and open up school, we had a lot of people at the table giving us advice, seeking information, and letting us know what was the best decisions in opening up school. So our approach to the decision making is a collaborative process. Lots of information was collected before I started as superintendent, but we continue to have a lot of listening sessions, getting feedback from our parents, from our staff, a lot of emails. And then once we made our decision, we kind of took our show on the road, and a lot of engagement. I'm really happy with our communications department. We've received good feedback on really giving information to our parents in a manner that they can understand. Since the spring, again, we have also connected with our students as well. We have individually and as a team gone through state and local guidance, line by line, to make sure that we understand we're ready to implement what we need to safely support learning. We've also worked through our local health organizations, pulling apart the data to better understand our local circumstances. And I think you do know that in our district, we have three ways that our students are learning. So our elementary students have come back in person 4 days a week. Wednesday is our day for students to do distance learning. With the cleaning at our middle level, we have our middle school students in a hybrid model. So we have half of our students coming to school on a Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday is the distance learning day. PLCs, time for teachers to plan and collaborate, do cleaning. And then we bring the other half of our students back to school to end the week on Thursday and Friday. Let's see. We have been consulting with our local communities and officials. There's something called a regional support team that we work with that has representatives from the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Education to ensure that we are on track and we're following the guidance from the governor. If you could advance to the next slide, please. So current data, our most current case rate was 11.2. The governor's framework provided 5 scenarios. So I just shared those. So again, elementary in person and our secondary level in a hybrid model. We did share information with our parents that on September 28th, our high school students would move from distance learning to a hybrid model. So if you are a high school parent, you would have gotten communication most recently to help our families get prepared, and we will continue to share information along the way. We are very pleased to see after an upwards trend that our numbers continue to go down over the last 2 reporting periods. We have really worked hard on masking. We have a masking policy, but also just a mask up campaign, really wanting our students to really adhere to the masking policy. And I am pleased to say that they have done an outstanding job at the elementary level and at the middle school level. So very pleased about that. If you could move to the next slide, please. So our learning models. So a modified hybrid. So based on all of the components of our data-informed decision-making process, from state guidance to public health data to staffing levels, we have landed on a modified hybrid model that has elements of in-person and distance learning. While we started in distance learning again at the high school level, again, our students will be starting on September 28th. I do want to give a shout out to our principals and our teachers at the high school level. They have been working very hard to get prepared. And if you think about it, in a hybrid model, that's very different. That's something very new to education, where we have a component of in-learning and virtual learning. And if you think about it, education has been around for a very long time, and we've asked our educators to really stretch, think creatively, but also really put themselves into getting our students engaged either through in-person or learning from home. If you could move to the next slide, please. All right, so in-person health and safety. We recognize that it's not always feasible to have 6 feet of distance between people. Staff and students, kindergartners, really are asked to mask up at all times unless an accommodation is requested with documentation from a provider. Staff and students will be provided with a face mask. Additional masks are available in the event that students forget. For the most part, I've had an opportunity to go in the variety of our buildings. I have seen, again, students that have had their masks on from home, but if they don't have one, we will always provide that for them. Social distancing, social distance floor and seat markings in public spaces, hallways, waiting and reception areas. I know that right now we're not allowing guests into the building, but do know that we have a lot of the PPE, the social markings, and our students and staff are working really hard to abide by those. We have ongoing review of transportation capacity, creating as much space between riders as possible, and regular disinfection on our buses. We also have ongoing review of classroom capacity and creating as much space as possible between students as possible. And we also have substantial restrictions on building visits by parents, volunteers, and external groups. One thing that we really had to talk about, there is a difference between in-person and hybrid. So in-person is bringing all of the students back and practicing the guidelines as much as possible and social distancing as much as possible. The hybrid model is half of the students coming to school and trying to adhere to our 6 feet of social distancing. So those are 2 different examples. If you could move to the next slide, please. All right, so the other piece that I forgot to share is that we have sanitizer that's readily available. And we are promoting good health and hygiene practices. And then we have routine cleaning of high-touch areas throughout the day, and our custodians are really on top of it. So on this slide, health and safety, in a hybrid model, all the precautions for in-person are in place. I did share this again, but additionally, our schools operate at 50% capacity, and physical distancing of 6 feet is maintained. So for example, at one of our middle schools, we have our students that are spread apart, our lunch tables are easily marked, and then we have an overflow. So if we have our students that have exceeded the capacity, we have our students that are having lunch in the auxiliary gym. So we're making sure that we are really adhering to the 50% capacity and 6 feet social distancing. We know how important access to regular nutrition is, so meals are available to students when they are not in school as well. If you could advance to the next slide, please. All right, so for our Eastern Carver County Online Learning Academy, we currently have about 1,300 students that are enrolled in this academy. So our families had the opportunity, if they wanted to select distance learning full-time for their students, they had this available. Distance learning will be provided through our Google Classroom, which allows us to deliver curriculum and learning in a variety of ways. Our classes are taught by a 1-12 instructor, and teachers at all levels will begin the year, or they have begun the year, by building strong relationships and creating a sense of belonging in distance learning communities with their students. There is a huge value to really establishing strong relationships because it's very different. And I know we know this as adults, to communicate virtually versus in person. So I'm really pleased with the job that our teachers have been doing to really make connections with our students. Teachers will host virtual check-ins daily to build relationships and provide academic support. And we've asked our parents and students to commit through the online academy through January 22nd, and then we'll reassess at the end of our first semester. And if you could move to the next slide, thank you. So health monitoring is very important. Families are asked to check their students for signs of illness before sending them to school and to keep kids at home when they're ill. We did send another communication out recently just to do those passive checks at home. And if children are exhibiting signs, we are really asking our parents to keep children at home to make sure that they've had their checks for the symptoms. Students who develop symptoms at school will be isolated in a designated space away from other students until they can be picked up. And then I think I have 2 more slides in this slide deck. So this is something that's always at the tip of everybody's mind, transitioning between models. We are constantly working with our partners to evaluate where we are within the framework. We work very closely with the Carver County Public Health Department, as well as the Minnesota Department of Health. Factors considered in decision-making are the impacts on the school community, staffing, and the public health data. We will monitor data and other concerns and reevaluate our models on a monthly basis. With the exception of quarantines necessary in the event of a positive case, staff and parents will be provided notice well in advance of any shifting in learning models. And then I have one last slide. Big question as we continue to move the dial front or back. Moving the dial toward full in-person learning will require a full community effort. Public health data needs to continue to move in the right direction, but we also need to follow the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC guidelines in wearing masks. I can't express that enough. And the masking policy is not only for our students, but it's for our staff as well. So we do have a policy, and then we also know that the governor has an executive order. We're asking our staff and our students to continue practicing social distancing, practicing good hygiene, and reducing our risk of exposure. I will tell you, earlier in the summer when we were meeting with Dr. Scott and leading up to making the selection on our learning models, one thing that he did share is that really following the guidelines, wearing the mask, and keeping our social distance, those are the measures that will help to keep our numbers down. So we've just tried to carry that along the way, and we've tried to be a good role model ourselves. Are there any questions based off of my presentation?
Any questions? No. Lisa, other than wear our masks and maintain social distance, what can we do to help support you?
So that's a great question. I would say, just a community push to really, really, really follow those guidelines. So social distancing just out in the community because, you know, so I'll share this. So working with Dr. Scott, one thing that he talked about with the spread of the virus, it was families that were getting together, possibly teenagers that were coming together and not practicing social distancing, wearing the mask. So anything that we can do in our own communities, in our own homes, to follow those guidelines are super helpful. Those are the pieces that we really think will make a difference. Washing the hands. I have to commend our parents and our community members about really, again, preparing our students. That was a concern that teachers had, that students wouldn't be ready. That is a non-issue. So those pieces that are happening away from school, let's continue to be really safe and to be really educated on the things that keep us safe in our communities and in our homes, because I know that we really value having our students in person as much as they can. That's where the learning occurs. But we also have to follow the guidelines, and we also have to follow the COVID cases. So the more that we can do our part, that's the biggest thing that I can ask for.
Great, well, that we can do. All right. Are there any other questions for Ms. Sales Adams?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to meeting you in person and working closely with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 5.2, the Edith Ann Award. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I know this is kind of a sad presentation of the Edith Ann Award this year. So when working with Deanne and Jeff Misgen, the winners of the 2020 award, we said when we go to take out the sign, we'll cheers on their back patio all together sometime. It was great to have Courtney out there last week to award them the 2020 Edith Ann Award. The Misgens live at 964 Woodview Circle up in the Bluffs. Here are a couple pictures of their property. They just painted their house. They had me wait a couple weeks for the pictures for the paint job, and it looks fantastic. They have extensive landscaping throughout their property, and then kind of their crown jewel is this big pond area in the back, and it's just beautiful. Something that I thought was really fun and cool about the Misgen family is that the work on their property is absolutely a family affair. So they keep busy with 8 kids, and then they still have time to be able to take care of their lawn, have it looking beautiful. So a couple photos that Deanne shared with me, and then we saw the fairy garden that their son takes care of, the tiny fairy. He was feeding her a strawberry when we were there last week. So just really sweet, absolutely a family affair. You can tell that they love spending time together working on their lawn, but then also enjoying it as well, as you can see with the patio. So some information about the Misgen family. They've been in Carver since 2014. If you've had Mizzy's Pizza from Belle Plaine, it's Jeff. So there he is up on the screen with 2 of their kiddos. They had a really positive spin on COVID, that it's allowed them some extra time to be in their yard, to have some family time together, to get their lawn in really good shape. So they were super appreciative to have their hard work this year recognized. I always ask for some advice for a novice gardener from the group that wins, and Deanne shared that you should always read your labels to know what zone you're in, and then choose plants that spark joy, which I thought was sweet and really representative of the work that she's doing on their property. And then she also suggested finding an online gardening group for tips, tricks, and encouragement. So overall, a really sweet and kind family that's really deserving of this award. So I hope you'll join me in congratulating the Misgens, and look forward to maybe next fall getting out there all together to do a backwards full group get together on their patio sometime.
Absolutely. And the other thing that they had shared is part of the catalyst for this was they had a graduating senior, so they thought they were going to spruce up the house for a really big graduation party, which never took place. So they've put a lot of work into this, and it looks super nice, and they're so proud of it, and they've done just an awesome job. So it was really cool to be out there, albeit not as much of a festive environment, and we kind of apologized. It was just Aaron and I backwards and forwards about it being a little bit of a non-event, especially in comparison to other years, but we'll absolutely have to go back out there and make a big thing of kind of the end of their year of reign of the Edith Ann Award. So thank you, Erin.
Sure.
All right, no public hearings this evening. Moving on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Excuse me, Mayor?
Yeah.
Can you pull 7.4, please?
Sure. So I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item 7.4.
I'll make a second.
So we have a motion by Mayor Johnson and a second by Councilmember Sayre. Any further discussion? All those, Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Hi, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayre,
I, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
I, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, item 7.4, Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have to apologize. I actually meant to do 7.3, but there's probably not a distinguishment in the difference here. I wanted to just point out a couple of the members of the council had pointed out an issue with on our claim sheet that I just wanted to identify publicly for those that are watching. Our Banyan accounting system on a invoice that has multiple kind of elements within it will pull the first item, and so when it shows up on the claim sheet, it'll appear as though that's the only item that is being paid for. And so that bring this full circle. The example that I use is we have a bill related to card member services, which is essentially the city's credit card. And so if you look at its face, it appears that the city spent $3,600 on food for election judges, which is not the case. And so I've talked to, and that happens with our engineering bill as well. And so I've talked to Kathy about working with our software company to help look at ways that we could re-describe that. Right now, there isn't a kind of a clear way that she can do that, but I just wanted to clarify that we didn't spend that that amount for food for election judges. It makes up multiple purchases out of several different departments. And then like the Bolton and Mink bill, we're not working on a special, Main Street park improvement project. Has to do with all the engineering work that's going on in the city, not just one specific project. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. There's also a fly in my office that's driving me absolutely crazy right now, so.
Well, that'll make the rest of the evening interesting, Brent. Thanks for explaining that, Brent. I had asked Brent the same question this afternoon, because if we spend that amount for election judges, it could be good for recruiting election judges, but seems a little bit out of hand. So thank you, Brent, for explaining that. I appreciate the explanation. Joy, do you have any comments? I saw you go off mute.
Oh, no, I didn't catch the election judges one. The Bolton and Bank was like what stood out to me. So I was the one who asked about that one. So good explanation. Yeah, it'd be great if we can get that improved because that just helps us better understand what's happening. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see. Item 8, no unfinished business this evening. Moving on to item 9, new business and the funds transfer. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you. Can you see my memo in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. So tonight, Mayor and Council, we're going to kind of wrap up kind of a series of ongoing discussions we've had related to kind of what I call several big picture projects, most notably street reconstruction. The City Council's had several conversations related to mill and overlay and full depth reclamation projects, and as previously approved projects on Kirchy Hill, High Street, Carver Creek Circle, Carver Bluffs Parkway, and most recently Ramsey Avenue. And so we've been discussing the need to do a transfer from the city's special capital fund to make the street maintenance fund whole. The city does an annual transfer, as a part of our general fund budgeting process, but in order to fund these projects, we'd have to do a special capital fund transfer. What you see on the bottom line of that table, it shows a 2021 budget contribution as pending, and that relates to the council's next decision on the next agenda item related to how much you want to allocate for street maintenance in the 2021 budget, either 85,000 or 120,000. And that number is kind of a rolling number. I showed the August fund balance for that, but as we go forward and make payments, that number will roll sometimes on a daily basis for the street maintenance fund. And then so if we're doing the transfer, I also wanted to provide some information related to the special capital project fund. You may remember that the council authorized a purchase out of there, an expenditure out of that fund for the city's new but reconstructed website. We actually just had a meeting on that again today with our leadership team and Brenda Good, who's leading that effort for the city. And we're hoping to have a really good update for the council in October related to where that is heading, and then a project or a website launch in early January for the new website. You can see the street maintenance fund, and then you can also see the American Tower easement. We're working on a closing. Larry Harris has been really helpful in bringing that thing to a close. And so we should, within the next week or two, have a closing date, and then we receive those funds shortly thereafter. You can also see pending items related to the 2021 budget. And so since those haven't been approved, I listed those as pending. And then an item that we've talked about kind of in broad strokes, it'll likely be an item that we can talk about during our strategic planning session, is our transit operations grant match. No, not so much the match, stupid fly, the grant match, but the kind of what long-term transit looks like in Carver. In the conversation that I had with the mayor this afternoon and kind of getting ready for tonight's meeting, I think it's fair to say, and it'll be a great conversation for the council to have, is what transit looks like kind of after the era of COVID. And, you know, I would offer that it's probably more socially and professionally acceptable to work from home than it was 6 months ago. And so how does that impact transit? And so Aaron and I have had a couple of conversations about work that the staff can put together related to facilitating that conversation amongst the council. I think there are a lot of layers to it, and understanding how we got here and what the world looks like going forward. Should be some great conversations for the council to have, and then also to use the feedback that we got in the community survey to inform that conversation. So a lot of different pieces within this, what I'd call a relatively simple funds transfer, but a lot of critical policy elements for the council going forward. So with that, there's an attached resolution for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Any questions? Or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 136-20, authorizing the transfer of funds.
There's
I'll second.
There's a motion by Councilmember Henry and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry.
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock.
Aye, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer.
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. 9.2, the 2021 preliminary tax levy. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you see my screen still?
Yes.
All right, so a really big and significant step in the city's annual budget process is the adoption of the preliminary levy. And what we've recently started to call this is it's essentially the budget for the budget. So you'll be working on various components and elements of expenditures and revenues well into the fall for the 2021 budget. But in order to secure transparency and resident and stakeholder engagement in that budget and effective tax impact conversation, the council and all entities will set a preliminary levy in September, which is then used and sent to the county, and they create truth and taxation statements. And so property owners throughout the state will receive a property tax notice indicating when they can have a conversation with that taxing authority on their proposed 2021 levy. And that can be lowered, but it can't be raised. Excuse me. So they'll be on that truth and taxation statement primarily. There'll be a hearing date for Carver County, Eastern Carver County Schools, and then finally the city of Carver. So in essence, what we've talked about before is it's like getting a bill from CenterPoint, Excel, and your cable provider all in one, and then having an opportunity to discuss that in each of those different scenarios. And so what we're tasked with tonight is adopting that preliminary levy. Now, if the council still has some time, if you can't reach a decision, we could schedule a special meeting, but we're in line to adopt it tonight and then send it to the county. And then we have our truth and taxation meeting scheduled for your first meeting in December, which is December 7th. So a real general overview of where we are at. We started out in May and April, kind of reviewing the budget with the department heads and presenting through a series of work sessions throughout the summer, and have landed on a couple of different scenarios. You can see the top line represents the general fund levy, so that primarily funds streets, parks, inspections, development, development planning. It doesn't fund development housing, if you will. It funds our staff to review those items, elections, etc. The debt service levy is debt service that the city council has already committed to paying. So that would be on street projects. So example, 4th Street, some capital equipment projects, some of the 2019 improvement projects, City Hall, the fire station, etc. And so those two numbers get us to our total tax levy. And then you can see what we've done, adopted in 2019 and 2020, and then that percent change year over year, along with the corresponding tax rate. Now, the tax rate is essentially a calculation by taking the city's total levy. So I'll use the 3,185,000 number in scenario A and dividing that into the city's net tax capacity. So essentially the value of all the properties in the city. And then that rate is multiplied by the property owner's own tax capacity. So kind of long story short, we have two different scenarios, which I'll describe below. I do want to point out, and several people have kind of mentioned this, so I want to call some attention to the estimated tax impact on a $300,000 home and a $312,000 home. You'll see that the levy, is higher in scenario A, the 3.185 million, or is lower, and then scenario B is higher at 3.22 million. The estimated tax impact is a reflection of a tax decrease. So I indicated in red and in italics. I should have added some parentheses there. I think that would have been more clear. But when your tax impact or when your levy goes up to the 3.22, you'll have less of a tax decrease. So we would go from $138 of estimated tax savings to $122 of estimated tax savings. So let me take some time to describe the differences between scenario A and B. We presented a 4% levy increase to the council, and then we're looking at two scenarios. One is this scenario A, which adds an additional $25,000 to initiate, what I'd call a savings plan for the future purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus, which we'd be planning for at year-end 2025. The fire department will still be working on grants in the interim, but if that was to be adopted, we'd start planning for allocations of approximately $39,000 for the next 4 years, so that we'd have enough money to purchase those units in 2026 for $180,000. Scenario B includes a self-contained breathing apparatus, but also provides an additional $35,000 in street maintenance funding. And although we don't have a traditional mill and overlay or reclamation project planned in 2021, those projects can be significant cost-wise. And so I think my understanding, the justification would be to build that fund for future projects. Here below, you can see the breakout between scenario B and A as it relates to tax capacity. And these numbers will fluctuate. These are estimates based on information that Carver County has presented to us, but they are what I would call good estimates, and you can see how we relate to 2020. I would offer that I wouldn't spend a lot of time looking at where our other cities are right now. I think you'll find a lot of cities in Carver County and frankly throughout the state are going to be in the same position the council has advocated for related to levy increases. And so I think you're going to see all these numbers go down, and we'll be able to provide a more detailed, or what I'd call more current tax capacity rate based on the preliminary levies that all the cities in the county adopted for your truth in taxation hearing. So I know that was a lot. I'd be happy to dig into any of the details that I maybe glossed over or you'd like some additional feed or detail on. So I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Christy.
When we're looking at the funding for the streets, have we made any accounting in this for, and it's escaping me right now, but the bonding, or not the bonding, but the money that we receive for the streets once we get a certain population? Is that included in here? Is this if we don't have it?
So based on what we know now, you're referring to the state aid program. So when we become a city of 5,000, we're eligible to receive state aid funding. We're likely, or I would almost guarantee that we will not receive that funding till no sooner than 2022. So at this point, all we're doing is kind of getting ready for it. Dan and the team from Bolton and Mink are getting ready to prepare a presentation. So the council will have to look at designating certain streets as state aid streets. But to the basics of your question, no, we haven't planned for that funding. It's not going to be available in 2021, but it will be available in 2022. And I think to your point, we'll be able to develop a strategy that maximizes that use, but it won't be available in 21.
That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
And Brent, that state aid money has to be for like collector streets, more heavily traveled streets. So where I'm coming from is kind of my concern about the overall maintenance of the neighborhood type streets that are getting old and are quite frankly starting to show their wear. So 4th Street, we could use it on potentially depending on what we determine, but not the River Oaks development or anywhere in the Bluffs.
Yeah, it's typically collector, and Dan might have to help me out here. I believe there's a certain mileage or number of miles that were assigned. So there are some limits to that. Dan, can you help me out with that?
Yeah, you're correct. It has to be on a state aid system, and so there's just some definitions that have to be met. It's going to start on a state aid route and end on a state aid route, and so ultimately your system can ultimately contain only so many miles based on formula, and then you pick the routes that are most advantageous that start on a state aid route and end on a state aid route, and that becomes your state aid system. So hopefully that addresses your question. Yeah, you won't get the local streets.
Okay.
I would say that it'll be significant. Dan has provided estimates of anywhere between 250 and 300,000. So there'll be an opportunity for to make a significant impact on those streets, but it won't apply to all streets.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Lori.
4th and probably 6th Street for sure.
Yeah, I would say probably 4th, 6th Street, perhaps Mount Hope Road. If the city moves forward with the turn back from Carver County, I would say Casa 40, or what we know as Main Street, and 4th Street East, Old Carver Road, that whole section would likely be there. Perhaps Carver Bluffs parts of Carver Bluffs Parkway. Those types of roads.
Okay, sorry for just the delay. Is that something then that we are eligible for every year until we kind of finish our projects, or how does that work?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but yes, that's an annual disbursement to cities.
Yes. Annual disbursement.
Okay, so that could knock out some huge chunks of our streets that we won't have to pay for out of our own pockets, I guess we'll say.
Yeah,
yep.
Like for example, like the council is moving forward with a maintenance project on 6th Street, or they're at least plan to, in the event that that street 10 years from now needs to be reconstructed. You can apply those funds for the reconstruction of that street. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes. The caveat is you have to follow state aid standards. So there does come with some strings attached, which means the road has to follow all their standards in order to use the money.
Lori, I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, the potential future of getting that state aid money, I would really like to not, mentally spend that on things like 6th Street, 4th Street. I think we really need to be prepared to put a lot of funds into 40 Old Carver Road. I think that state aid, if we get it, when we get it, and if and when that road is overturned to us, we'll be needing to apply the funds for that.
Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with Councilmember Sayer's statement. I would only add to it, saying that part of that negotiation with the county to take over that road is the city will require them, or not require, but will negotiate that the road has to meet certain specifications, so that if we want the entire roadway to be mill and overlaid and stormwater issues to be resolved, that's kind of those are the requirements that likely the city would have in order to take that road, that those items were completed and the road was brought up to what our standards are, so that we're, in essence, not getting a road that we have to consider repairing day one. It would be, I don't know how that standard is defined, Dan. Could you maybe explain that for the council?
For the turnback?
Yeah, what could they have by way of expectations for a turnback for the county to provide as by way of repairs to that roadway section?
Well, the turnbacks can get to be a little bit of a negotiated process, but it comes down to the minimum safe standards and functional standards that the city would consider to be met, such that they're willing to take over the roadways. So we would help to identify those issues. For example, if there's an existing safety issue that we consider a hazard, that would be brought up, and that would be a cost that the county would consider addressing. There's a severe, pavement issue, that would be something that we'd be looking for the county to address prior to taking it over. So I would say it's a bit of a negotiated effort, but the core of it is, safety and the core function of the roadway for maintenance.
How long ago was that road redone on 40?
I don't have an answer on that one. I'd have to look that up.
That was under major construction, 6 years maybe?
A lot of it was reconstructed with the MCES, or the sanitary sewer project. So that would have been in 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Joy, questions, comments? Glenn?
I just don't want to bank on any state money. I just soon put some rainy day money aside for it. But yeah, with the turnover from Casa 40, there will be some issues that the county will need to address, and that will be at their expense. So that's my biggest concern, is making sure that our infrastructure is tied up, and I don't like banking on the state's money. That's the biggest thing. I'd rather set aside some of our money, just to make sure that we are covered for the citizens, and if we get the state aid, and then we can decide at that time what we can do with those funds that we've been saving.
I guess I'll just state that I concur with Councilmember Henry, and I would like to take the opportunity to put money into that street maintenance fund. As we've said, I think a couple of times, we have some neighborhoods with some pretty old streets that are going to need some repair, and it's not cheap. We've seen that with some of the projects we've been able to squeeze through this year. So I think it's a great opportunity to take some funds and put it in there, just so that we're prepared for when we need to do that, when we have a crisp plan and we have a better understanding of the state aid money, et cetera. So I really support scenario B that's being proposed here.
Thank you, Joy. I think for me, I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, I support scenario B too. I think it's wise at this point to put some extra money towards our street reconstruction and street maintenance plans. We kind of essentially had this debate earlier this year when we decided not to do franchise fees. That money has to come from somewhere, and even when we add in the $35,000 kind of additional, or in this scenario, it's still not funding it to some of the scenarios or some of the lengths that we were looking at when we were considering our options for franchise fees. I think we are in a place where this is extremely more palatable for me, because if you look at it with the example that's up on the screen right now, we're talking a $16, $17 difference in taxes. And we're still going to have residents recognize a decrease in their taxes. So with that, I make a motion to adopt Resolution 137-20, certifying the 2021 preliminary tax levy in the amount of $3,220,948.
I'll second that.
Lori, that was you? Okay, sorry. We have a motion by Mayor Johnson and a second by Councilmember Sayer. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I know we've been talking about this, and we had quite a lengthy discussion about it at our last meeting. Although, it's a small amount that is being added, I guess we'll say added back in from A to B. I am very cognizant of the fact that the world, job-wise and economy-wise, is a bit unstable going into 2021. And when I look at it, I try and look big picture, is that if every utility and every thing that you get charged for by year, by month, and everyone said, oh, it's just this much, oh, it's just this much, it's just this much, that adds up, that can add up for families who might be struggling. So I hear so far from at least two of you that option B is more favored. For me, I still would like to stick with option A. I want to be as conservative as I can be when looking at 2021, being that we don't know what it looks like for everyone and what the world and the economy is going to be happening for us in 2021 next year. So I guess I wanted to just put that 2 cents in there.
Thank you, Christy. Any other further discussion? All right, Christy, I just want to address your concerns. I appreciate your concerns about the economy and the unemployed. I will argue that maybe nobody knows better about how tough of a job market it is out there than me right now. So I appreciate that, but what I'm looking at is a $17 difference. And I think playing the long game and kind of keeping the bigger picture in mind, that this is the best option. So
I would just like to stay back that I think this budget looks very good. I really am really happy with it. So by looking at scenario A rather than B, by no means do I want to say that I think that this budget did not come in well, as it did.
Yeah, I didn't I didn't take your comments to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. With that, go ahead, Glenn.
I'd just like to remind everybody, this is a not to exceed preliminary budget. Once it's in, we can always take it out. But if we take it out now, we can't put it back in.
Thank you, Glenn. That is a good reminder. Seeing nobody else raising their hand for further comment, Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry.
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock.
Nay, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer.
I, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, the vote was 4-1 with Councilmember Mock voting against. Moving on to the water treatment plant expansion plans and specs. Mr. Lannis, have at it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Brent, I'm waiting for the opportunity to share here.
Is it telling you that you can't?
Yeah, it was just telling me that one participant at a time. So now I got it though.
Okay.
So here we go. All right. Well, once again, back to talk about your water system expansion. So we'll do a little bit of review, and then we'll talk about where things stand at this point here, and then some next steps. Obviously, you know, the agenda item is authorization of plans and specifications. So we'll get to that next step here and bring you up to speed on where things are right now. So just for the viewers and anybody who's chiming in a little bit later in this process here, history of water supply in Carver goes back quite a while. I'd say the big milestone is in 2004, when the first community water treatment facility was constructed. So it's coming up on almost 20 years since that was built. So it is certainly getting to that point where expansion was going to be needed. Not going to be the last time in the city of Carver's history and future here that you're going to be dealing with water, but this is another big milestone here in expansion of your first water treatment facility. So going back to your existing system here, you've got one water treatment plant, 4 municipal wells, and 2 water towers. So what we're really going to be dealing with today is your water treatment capacity itself, the water treatment facility. So a couple of critical definitions to remind everyone that firm capacity is really what we look at when we look into the capacity of your system. Water obviously has to be very reliable, and so we look at your capacity with one of your largest producers out of service. So that does happen. Wells go out, or pumps fail, filters need maintenance. So firm capacity is when something goes wrong. What's your demand, and can we meet that demand when that largest element is out of service? And then of course fire flow. It's necessary to fight a fire even when it's hot and everybody's got their sprinklers on. So maximum day demand is really what is the basis of our capacity review here. So how are we to the point where we need to expand? Well, you can see over here, this is your growth area, and you already know a lot of the growth that's been happening along the Jonathan Carver Parkway corridor here. There's a lot of area to grow. So when we look at the ultimate capacity that needs to be accounted for, it's everything in your growth area. And so that is a lot of users and a lot of water. So you can see from some of the past demand reviews here, back in 16 and 17, you're actually hovering above your maximum day demand that's considered sustainable. So you've been hovering at that point for a while where that expansion was necessary. So I think this is what just drives the point home that you're not really early in the process at this point. You're kind of tracking right where you should be. You know the demand was coming. You studied it. You evaluated the expansion, and now we're gearing towards next step, which is making that expansion happen such that you're going to be good for a number of years past this. So to really reiterate that this isn't a if, it's a when. Your 2020 population of your 21 population of about 5,000. That would demand a maximum a day requirement of about 1.2 million gallons. That's hovering right above the desired sustainable capacity. It's going to be fine for this next year and until 2022 when this is constructed. We've certainly planned for that potential here. What is inevitable though is when you look at your 2030, when you get up to a population of about 10,000, you're over double your capacity. So that's really the number that should cement in everyone's mind that it's not an if, it's a when. And the when is certainly now to stay in front of that potential before you are out. So what you're building here into your capacity is what's shown in yellow. You've got down here in the kind of the greenish blue here is this existing treatment capacity. So you've been kind of hovering at that line. They've done a few things to stay above your needed treatment capacity. This is what you'll be building though, this additional capacity in yellow. And that's what's going to put you out many years out to an approximate population of over 10,000. Now, I like to use population as opposed to years because how long it takes you to get to 10,000 as a community can vary a great deal. Lots of factors can swing this in one direction or the other. But when you're hovering over 10,000, again, there'll be some discussions about what elements are necessary to stay above your filtering capacity. And there are other elements to a water treatment system. There's water towers and there's wells, and we've planned for those. We've planned for the wells water treatment facility process here. So about the water system expansion that's in front of you. Going back just briefly, I do want to reiterate before we take this next step that we've spent a lot of time talking about location concepts for future water treatment facility. You're all aware that the ultimate recommendation and solution to your capacity issue is expansion of the existing site. But there's always been talk for the last 10 years about expanding up into the northwest here. And just as a refresher, the rationale was to get near this yellow area, which would be Jordan Aquifer accessibility. So in this area, there's an aquifer that's considered a very high capacity aquifer that usually will allow you to get almost double the capacity out of your wells. And so there's a lot of interest to try and build near that. What we ultimately ended up with is, at this point, our solution is more effective to expand your existing facility and plan for this ultimate second site, and try and plan that second site near these high capacity aquifers for higher capacity wells. And so that still should be part of the thinking is as opportunity arises, as development occurs, continue to think about this northwest area near this aquifer for future expansion. And that may not happen for a long time, but it's still advised to start thinking about siting such that it does not end up being an acquisition effort for land for your expansion, but it's kind of planned into your system over the next decade.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
This is Lori. Can we go back to that?
Yes.
And I'm getting quite a echo, so I'll try to make it quick. The northwest of W4T2, is that close enough to the aquifer that was identified from the hydraulic study? Is it something where you have to be in that yellow zone, or is it just being close to it?
You want to be close to the yellow zone, and I'd say W4 is not close enough. In fact, W4 is an existing well, and that is actually a much lower capacity well. It's in another aquifer called the Fig. That's about half the capacity of what you typically see in the Jordan. So no, that isn't quite close enough. But again, the water treatment facility doesn't have to be in the yellow zone. It just wants to be close enough that you're not bringing the wells a long ways to it. That's the theory.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
And just, can you go back to that slide? Yes, thank you. I think there is just, I just wanted to point out, I think there's one error on that slide, and that we're not planning for a future water treatment plant at the Lakeview Industries site. I think that was intended to be west, so the just below W4 and T2 there. I think that might have been an old photo. I don't want anyone to think that somehow that's going to be developed into a future water treatment plant.
Yes, good point. This was pulled from a prior presentation from of sites that were evaluated and considered, and there's been a number of these sites that were considered. We had quite a few. I would concur that there's nothing definitive about either of these sites or anything that is certain. It's the point being is out west, a future site should be spotted, is ultimately the takeaway on this. Near the yellow, I should say. Yeah, thanks for those comments and supplemental statements here. That's very, very applicable. So the expansion projects that we're talking about today is the additional well supply. That's drilling production well number 5. And a compliance monitoring well. That's really first in order. We can't drill 2 wells at one time. Ultimately, the DNR is going to expect that or require that one well go in, a compliance well, monitoring well go in, they get pumped, checked, and then a second well would potentially be permitted to go online at a later date. So that's how everything is sequenced and set up at this point. The capacity needs will be met with well number 5. So that will bring you well above your needs for a while. So well 6 will be based on what type of capacity we get on well number 5 and the DNR's review of the drawdown from that well in the aquifer. So then, of course, there's a raw water main piping that goes from the wells to the water treatment plant, and then a 1.5 million gallon per day addition to your treatment capacity at the existing site. So this is your wells and raw water lines. So I'll put my little laser pointer up here. So here's well number 4. Laura, you were just asking about that. That's an existing well. That would be plumbed down across the highway and would go into this new blue line. So this the black is in place. The blue would be new. So that would be installed this next year and brought all the way to the existing water treatment facility. And this is well number 5 location. So this would all be priced out here with obviously the bidding phase. And this is what we're authorizing at this point, this project right through here as one of the projects. Then, of course, the water treatment facility expansion, the existing site, you're all familiar with. Bird's eye view of that site and a bird's eye view of...
Mr. Blanes, it's Lori again. Can I ask another question 2 slides back?
Yep.
When there's where the light blue is,
Yep.
right over 212 and then Jonathan Carver Parkway,
Yep.
Is there any hope or like small possibility that whatever's done there, the moving dirt, can align with the Jonathan Carver Parkway project, or is that possible?
Yeah, I think I can answer that question. Yeah, it's a very good question and very applicable. So much that yes, it has been done in that way. JCP actually has this work in it, this section, as for casing pipe, just because it all has to be tied together. But it's best for the JCP project to actually cover this crossing for coordination purposes. it's all, would be budgeted together, but, of course, if this was not authorized to proceed, that would not happen in the same way that the rest of the pipe wouldn't happen, but it was coordinated together. So with JCP within the right of way, that section of the plan is coordinated with the county contract, and the rest of it is what we're talking about today. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's great news.
Yep. Oh, good.
And I have a question then, as long as we're on this slide. So when we're looking at, and maybe you said it already, and I missed it, but when we're looking at running that line along that proposed water main, are we ripping up all of the streets there again completely, or is part of that goes in the right of way?
Up like Spring Creek Drive, for example, that's largely drilled.
Okay.
And Aaron Schmidt's on the line too. He's been working a lot on the details of this design. I can say most of this contract is directionally drilled, but
okay.
there are spots in which, with any drilling contract, if you see it happen, you have to open up either end. And
Okay.
so there's going to be impacts along the corridor in spots, but most of the work is drilled. So if Aaron, if you wanted to chime in on that, if you wanted to offer any.
Well, and Dan, actually, that answers what I need. So.
Okay. All righty.
For timing, that's great. Thank you.
Yep. Keep going then. So we'll have more to come on the details on that construction as well for you. So. Okay, so your existing water treatment site, backyard, and this is what the expansion would look like. This is where all the magic would happen for that additional 1.5 million gallons of treatment. There'd be a couple of additional filters in there, and a lot of plumbing, piping, and additional aeration and such. So, and chemical feeds and such, but it all will operate together like a single facility. So you think it's going to come together quite well and operate like one large plant. So I think the plan's coming together really well as we're seeing it. So, and we also feel that there's going to be some aesthetic enhancements on the site when this is completed versus existing conditions. So we hope even the neighbors will be happy with the improvements when it's all completed. So again, this is a view of the expansion from the street level with some of the trees and fencing planned. So where are we in time?
Excuse me, Dan.
Yes.
Can you jump back to those slides? I know this is something that we've talked to a couple of the neighbors about and updated, but can you just tee up that conversation for the council? The plans intend to close Tower Road for the length of the construction effort.
Yes. Yeah, we did have a comment regarding concerns about the closure of this and can we keep it open? And my answer to that is in theory, it's possible to keep almost any road open, and we can keep 4-lane highways with 50,000 cars on them open. But it's not always desirable or the safest route. It's usually you do it if you absolutely have to. I would strongly advise against that, because what we're going to have is a very minimal amount of traffic that would use this route that has a very good alternate route. And they'd have to drive through a work zone with materials stacked, deliveries coming and going. Quite frankly, I don't think it's the safest for the workers or for the residents to be traveling through a work zone like this. And it does add, if we're going to make it a very safe route where they have a nice designated road to be on that contractors would not be able to use, it adds a fair amount of expense and complexity to the contractor's workflow as far as deliveries and such. So I would strongly advise against keeping that open for those reasons and letting them use this alternate route for the duration of construction. So that's how we'd be suggesting that you proceed on that issue. So the progress to date, we've come a long way. Obviously going back to 2011 when some of the planning planning started for, potential growth in the Northwest. A lot of studies have occurred over the last few years. You've heard lots of information about budgets and alternatives, and so we've gotten to the point where we've got our path as far as the expansion. We had a public open house on the 16th, so Brent just asked me to review some of those issues. I think we've addressed almost every issue that came up. I mean, obviously the one caveat was the comment about that roadway being open, but we also had some residents that commented about the preference to close it. So overall, we feel we have responded pretty significantly to some of the information we heard at that open house. We're now at the point of our contract documents for bidding. We've been working pretty feverishly on putting plan specs and bid documents together and getting the permits in place for this job to bid out. And so we are at the point tonight of authorizing this project for bidding. That's effectively a step on our process of accepting plans and specifications and authorizing advertisements for bid. So what we have here for a project budget is not changed from the last time that you saw this. Drilling new wells 5 and 6. We talked a little bit about that. Well, number 5 would be first. That was a previously approved amount of 1.1 million, but I believe it's 1.1 with the bond premium. Is the number on the wells. Expand existing water treatment facility and water supply infrastructure, which includes the raw water lines from wells to the site. Well controls, pumps, connections for 2 wells, and the water treatment facility expansion and upgrades. A total project cost of $11 million is the budget for that, and of course the total adds to a 12.1. So this is contingent on the big moment of opening bids. So we're optimistic that we'll have a good bidding environment, and unfortunately we never know until bid day about a project like this. Projects like this don't go out every single day. So we only have so much data to draw from as to what the bidding environment is going to be, but we will know in 3 weeks. We think we have a fair budget, and we'll be letting you know in a number of weeks about how that came in. So the step that would be in front of you tonight is the request for approving plans, authorizing bidding would be the action requested at this point. Bidding would be in October, minimum obviously 3 weeks of 21 days of advertising. Of course, so we're talking mid to later October. Awarding contracts is planned for November 16th, and then construction would be occurring starting in the spring of 21, and most of the work you'd be seeing would be next year. Water treatment facility itself, we're expecting the contractor to hold off until spring. If we awarded the 16th, they would have some opportunities to do some work a little bit earlier. If they chose, if we had weather that was favorable for doing some work in the winter time, for example, they would have that opportunity. But we're expecting most of the work to occur later in the spring, based on the amount of construction that's necessary to get this done by summer of 2022. So construct well number 6 will be a later activity after we get some information from well number 5. So the schedule summary is obviously today would be the approval to bid, to advertise for bidding, and of course to reiterate, award the 16th, and December is what we're going to call construction for the water treatment facility itself. So we are planning for a ribbon cutting summer of 2022 for the big moment when you would have that additional capacity. And again, approval of plans and specs is the requested action, and I will open it up to questions.
Just one comment before throw it over to the council. Just wanted to make a distinguishment. Dan, can you go back to the budget slide, please? So these numbers represent project budget, which would include engineering, legal, financing costs, etc. So when the bids come in October, you won't see bid numbers reflective of these numbers. Those would be considered construction budget numbers as it relates to the bid amount. Is that an accurate description, Dan?
Yeah. But when those bids come in, we will do a revised project budget based on all expectations, including some construction contingencies and such for construction on teams and such. So we will give you the amended budget based on construction numbers is what we plan to do with your exact bid amounts. And
then the final item is Dan and I, along with Paul Steinman from Baker Tilly, have been coordinating the financial aspect of this, and we're contemplating probably a early, maybe around March timeframe for seeking to acquire or sell bonds to fund this project, and then the Jonathan Carver Parkway Improvement Project, just so you have a little bit of idea of the back end for the financing of these two projects.
On that note, Brent, so if we sell the bonds in March, when is our payment due? When do we start paying against that bond?
We would levy, in the case of the general fund bonds, for levy year 2022. We're set up for that. We might have some more flexibility with the enterprise or the utilities functions, just based on fund balance. But that's been a topic of ongoing conversation between Paul Steinman and I, and so that's something that we're going to want to clearly identify for the council as a part of that process, so that you can have an understanding of the pros and cons of different interest payments. I mean, there's some pretty creative things that Paul and Baker Tilly can take a leadership role on to help us manage these payments, and we're going to explore those options and present to the council in the early part of 2021.
Okay, great, perfect. That was one of my main questions I had.
Do you have any other questions, Joy?
No.
Okay. Any other questions from the group? Go ahead, Glenn.
Dan, for drilling of well number 5, does that 1.1 include, do we have to purchase the property from the landowner, or is that through eminent domain, or what, how does that process work?
There's no land acquisition associated with this current plan for well number 5, for well number 5 or well number 6.
Okay.
So well number 5 is in a conservation easement. It was planned with the prior development in that area as a potential well site, and so it's been set up for some time as a possible well site. So yes, thankfully there's no acquisition associated with these two sites. If we end up with a dry well, which unlikely, but it does happen, we'll have to revisit the topic with you and talk further. But at this point, no land acquisition.
Okay. Dan, can you explain there might be some unintended consequences related to the depth of, I think it's well 5 on the western end that we're navigating, just to give them a preview?
Yeah. Well number 5 is the first planned well at this point. There's a residence nearby that typically we would not expect any well interference with, but we did do some investigations, and we're taking a look at all the wells around well number 5. I just as a precautionary measure to see how deep their wells are, and although it's not common, we do feel that there might be a chance that one of the wells from a residential property is deep enough that they could be influenced by this. So we're trying to be proactive with this and reaching out to the property owner to discuss how how that would be addressed if there is a situation where during pumping and during certain phases of well operations that their well is influenced, that to come up with a plan that would address that interference. And that, I mean, it could be as something as simple as just hooking them up to city water. But like I said, those discussions are occurring, and again, it's not a for sure that there'd be an issue, but we do have to be, we have to be cautious, because we would not want to find that out during the pumping operation and not have that planned into the process. So we're looking at that right now.
And that's for a property in Dahlgren Township.
Yes. Yep.
Any
That
other
answers
questions,
my
Glenn?
question.
Okay. Lori?
No questions, thank you.
Christy?
Or no additional questions.
I'd be happy to make a motion, Courtney, unless you have something that you would like to.
No, go have at it.
All right. I would like to make a motion to adopt resolution 138-20, approving plans and specifications and ordering advertisement for the bids for the water system expansion projects.
I will second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Mock and a second by Councilmember Henry. Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Hi, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 9.4, the Parks Master Plan Amendment. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we'll be talking through Parks Master Plan Amendment in relation to the Jonathan Carver Parkway project and rectangular rapid flash beacon, which I will call an RRFB moving forward because I always struggle with that acronym. So tonight, again, we're talking through a Parks Master Plan Amendment, so I'll give you some detail, give you an update from the Parks Commission, and then I'll put it up for discussion. So an RRFB is contemplated as part of the Jonathan Carver Parkway reconstruction project to be an additional access point for pedestrians to go over the corridor. So with construction, there will be 2 underpasses, but it's been identified that this additional would add to the project, increase trail connectivity, and provide for a safer corridor for pedestrians as well as traffic, to give people a little bit more of a heads up that this area is active with pedestrians and it's something that they need to be cognizant of as they travel the corridor. So the RRFB would be installed as part of the project. Something that we need to think about tonight is that with a Parks Master Plan Amendment, this project can be funded with park dedication dollars. So in 2019, when the Parks Master Plan was adopted, the RRFB as part of this project was not contemplated. So we need to go back and amend the Parks Master Plan to include this project so park dedication dollars can be used should you be favorable for the resolution. So the Parks Master Plan, yes, was recently adopted, but we need to think about it in companion with Design Carver, the city's 2040 comprehensive plan. So we reference the Parks Master Plan throughout Design Carver to be our parks and trails document. Something that is really both tragic and great about these plans is that we can dream pretty big and we can set projects that we have a pretty good inkling that they aren't going to happen during the life of the plan. They're big, they're dreamy, they're fun to talk about. And I always appreciate that we can put a little nugget of what we're thinking about today into the minds of the people who might be sitting in these chairs 10 years from now, 20 years from now, by creating some of these plans. So something that we know about the Parks Master Plan right now is that it will run for the life of Design Carver. So that's the next 10 years. So yes, we plan through 2040, but the plan will need to be updated at the very latest in 2030. So what do we think we'll accomplish in the next 10 years? Thinking through park dedication dollars, some challenges we know for utilities and development south of town. It's not anticipated that full build out of Park Search Area 4, so the one that's south of town that becomes the field complex, It's not anticipated that we will be able to chip away at this entire project and see it to fruition in the next 10 years. We might be able to move forward with some parts of it, like land acquisition we talk about pretty often, securing that property now, as opposed to when it's directly next to our city limits, when the price will likely increase pretty drastically. But it's not anticipated that full build out of this project could happen in the next 10 years. But again, we're planning for 2040. It goes with our comprehensive plan. Maybe my crystal ball is completely incorrect and we'll shoot down south and we'll have this lovely park, but it's not anticipated at this time. So for the Parks Master Plan amendment, we're amending the budget for the Park Search Area 4 to allow for funding for the RRFB, or the Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon, as part of the JCP construction project. So some additional details about the location. It's been identified that the location is roughly 100 feet south of the roundabout on 6th Street. So we haven't set the exact location, but thinking about it here, you can see that they will loop into our trail system, both in Community Park as well as the west side of town. So thinking about Meridian Fields, Carver Elementary, Copper Hills, Oak Tree, everything that's there today, but also the continued development west of town. This is going to continue to be a hot corridor for pedestrians to get safely across Jonathan Carver Parkway. So again, 2 underpasses are contemplated as part of the project. This is an additional pedestrian spot for people to go over the corridor. So with the Parks Commission, they've reviewed this a couple of times. We talked pretty extensively about our trail connection and what we need to do to make sure that people can move safely from both sides of the corridor. This one also feels important right now with some businesses that are directly in the area, knowing that children of tomorrow often cross the corridor to get to Community Park. So they are the ones that are there today, likely not the only ones that will be in that location that will actively use this. But the addition of this project would increase our trail connectivity. So tonight we're contemplating an amendment to the Parks Master Plan to include the RRFB. So page 32 of the document got a pretty heavy lift on including some additional language. So I'll open it up for discussion and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Erin, just with this RRFB, that crosswalk that's in that picture that's being shown right now is going to be moved to the south by 100 feet or whatever it was, right?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Sorry, I'll also add that the Parks Commission reviewed the Parks Master Plan amendment last Monday, September 14th at their meeting, and recommended approval to council on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. Glenn, any comments? Let's see. Lori, anything?
I do. I don't support this the way it's presented. I definitely am in favor of, I was kind of thinking what words to use here, of allocating the funds. But I'm not comfortable with the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I still would rather see either an underpass or, a footbridge, something over it. Yeah, I have reasons. And one thing too is since we actually have the city property on both sides, the land acquisition would be smooth. But that's where I am at. This isn't something I will be voting yes for.
Right. Lori, I don't expect to change your mind, but I'm going to ask Dan to weigh in at the price of $125,000. Not only do I trust our council as far as from an engineering perspective that this is the best way to handle this intersection, but I believe that it is beyond the most financially responsible option. Dan, do you have any ballpark figures on underpass or overpass?
Yeah, well, the overpasses are quite expensive. Those are typically going to be, about, in many cases, you're looking at about $1 to $1.5 million. They can go up from there, but minimum is usually going to be about $1 million plus to try and get a bridge with the walkway system to get up to it. So that's usually reserved for the very highest crossing locations that are and very, very high traffic levels, highways, super high volumes systems. So I would say that would be a little atypical for this location. The underpass would be more of a typical treatment here if certainly if funding was available, if it was well set up for grades to do it. I would say if you went into an underpass situation, it'd be the third underpass on this corridor. And I think that's what's kind of driving this decision towards towards something a little bit more surface oriented, is that ultimately in a typical corridor, you might have one or two grade separated crossings, and you're now going to have two locations that are grade separated. It's, to Lori's point, it is always nice to completely separate the pets from traffic, but you have to weigh out demand versus cost, other opportunities, and factor all those things into a decision. And this is one of the reasons why the underpass wasn't as applicable here, as you already have a intersection here that's going to keep traffic speeds down. So you have a situation where traffic's going to be slowing down, and the other locations on this corridor were high speed near the school and such, and so that's why the grade separation priority ended up being up to the north. So I guess the cleanest way to answer the question is we thought is probably the most budget conscious way for a safe crossing to occur in this area, taking into account the fact that you already have two grade separated box culverts, and the box culverts typically between $500,000 and $600,000 plus, and depending on the location to get that in versus this this treatment, which has been shown to be effective. So that's the best I can answer it. I'll always have to say a grade separation is our ideal. If money were no object, but it ends up being a balance of circumstances when you make a call like this.
Has this been maybe already vetted out and it's just not a viable option? But the second underpass that's going to be created for Monroe Drive, Spring Creek Drive, could that they just utilize the nearby crosswalk, or could there be an RRPD there, and then this that is on the screen right now, then that would become the second underpass?
In the location of the underpass where it is, that would probably not be as desirable for RFB. That's going to be our high speed area, about 55 through that area. What you'd end up doing is, I think you'd eliminate the ped crossing in its entirety up there, and you'd use the ped signal or the signal system itself. But there's also some significant issues with high volumes of kids traveling across a signalized intersection on a high volume, high speed roadway. So I think the focal point of that north crossing was the school, and that was the driver. It was really tied to the school and trying to avoid kids from having to make judgment calls crossing a four lane highway with a ped push button. And so I think it's really the school location was what drove priority in that location, and the fact that this was selected as a roundabout, which is going to bring the speeds down a great deal in this area. So that's the thinking, I would say, today, as pertains to that question.
Oh, thank you for explaining that. That helps.
Yeah, anecdotally, Lori, when I talk to folks about this project, the one thing it seems like folks are the most excited about are the underpass up by Monroe Drive or from Spring Creek on kind of the north side of Carver Elementary. Of all those folks who, for traffic reasons at the crossing at the school or for their kids traveling to school, it's been a really well-received addition to the project. Joy, Christy, any thoughts, comments?
I have no other thoughts, comments. I think I expressed my support for this kind of method of crossing, so I'm glad we're able to make it part of the Master Parks plan so that we can help fund it through that fund.
Christy?
I'm good too, thank you.
Okay. With that, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 139-20, approving a parks master plan amendment.
I will second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McKnight and a second by Councilmember Mock. Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mott,
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Nay, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. So we had a 4-1 vote with Councilmember Sayer voting against. All right, moving on, communications, 10.1, the CARES Act, Business and Housing Program Update. Ms. Smith.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So as you know, we've been working really closely with the Carver County Community Development Agency, or the Carver County CDA, on administration of the city's CARES dollars. So the federal money received for, I shouldn't have done this, Corona Aid Relief,
Yep.
program. So an update on the program, we had 11 businesses in Carver apply for our business program, and then 3 were vetted out. 1 was in the township, and then 2 were home-based businesses. So something we focused on the program was not including home-based. So 8 businesses total qualified. Of that, the CDA had their own pot of money for funding, and 4 of those businesses were selected to receive funding through the CDA's grant dollars. And then we have up to $120,000, so 12 businesses could apply for the $10,000. So the exciting news for us is that all businesses in Carver that applied will be receiving dollars through the CARES Act. Something that we've been kind of puzzled by, but also thinking through, is the lack of engagement on the residential side. So we had 1 Carver city-specific application of $2,300 that was funded through our residential program. So we've noodled a little bit. Is it too early for residential programs to be needed? What does it look like? So I'm working with Elise Durbin at the CDA now to rethink our dollars a little bit, since there was such low interest in the residential program. Are there more effective ways that we could recapture those dollars and use them at the city level if there's not a ton of interest on the residential side? So exciting news for our business program. It sounds like 8 businesses will be fully funded for their requests, but unfortunately just 1 residential application was received for the city of Carver.
Aaron, I have a question. When we put out for the residential side, do they have to be in foreclosure, or what was our stipulations again on applying, or just they're behind on bills? How did that work?
Yeah, so that was the tricky part that we've thought about quite a bit. It almost felt like you needed to be in trouble at the start of COVID to be able to qualify. I can pull up the program, but you needed to be, I think, at risk or entering foreclosure to be applicable for the residential dollars.
Okay. Bring me, is that a stipulation that came with that CARES Act, or is that something that we enacted thinking that that was the right path to go on at the time? Is that something we can change, where it doesn't necessarily have to be there? We can get them before they're in such dire straits, or does it have to be to that point?
I think we kind of designed the program with the CDA so we could explore other options. On the rental side, Elise has really anecdotally shared it feels a little bit tricky since their evictions aren't happening right now, that people aren't feeling the strain of needing to pay their rent necessarily right now, so they might not be recognizing how far behind they are. So to have just that 1 application could also be tied to evictions not happening currently. So a lot of factors I think play in. We have tried to figure it out probably more than we should have, but there is potential that we could also have the dollars back at the city level for some reallocation.
Okay.
Christy, I've got the requirements up, and it says it's rent your own primary housing anywhere in the city of Carver and are a resident or lawful permanent resident, current on housing and utilities as of March 1st, loss of income due to COVID that has not been replaced by unemployment insurance or any other emergency assistance, you're behind on housing and or utility costs. And I think that that's the tidbit that you're looking at. And then The last one is about folks who receive subsidized housing or other rental assistance aren't eligible. You're on mute, Christy.
I'm still, sorry about that, still muted, talking. Courtney, does it say on there too, since you have it in front of you, how do they prove? So let's say they have lost their job, but again, it's not covered by unemployment. So let's say their gas bill is way behind. Do they have to come in with the proof? How do they prove that they're not?
It says verifications to be collected, contact information for the landlord, mortgage statement, utility bills, and or account numbers. Documentation.
I can answer that too. The CDA doesn't cut a check to the resident, they pay the bill.
Right. But let's say somebody is falling far behind on their gas bill. Is that something they can just, I mean, they can go in and say, hey, here it is. How do they prove that they're having a hardship? Not just, I didn't want to pay my bill, so now I want some money. Not that we don't want to help people, but let's be honest. I mean,
well,
like that.
So the other thing is you have to prove all income from the last 30 days, change of employment due to COVID-19. So I think that that's the applicable, proof of hardship. You know, Aaron, I appreciate you trying to be creative and thinking about this. I've thought about it too. I think folks, you know, this has been long and this is hard, but I feel like we're not far enough into it, especially for homeowners, to perhaps be seeing like being behind on their mortgage. And, you know, we talked in the Business Alliance meeting on Friday. What's the one consistent piece of financial information that everybody's received? And it's that you've got to have 6 months worth of expenses or savings to cover your expenses. And while I'm not sure how many folks have that, you know, we're still kind of in that threshold if you do. And, you know, there have been some pretty good programs for those who are unemployed as far as kind of making up the balance in for some folks who might not be working. So
when does this program have to end, Aaron?
Brent, I might pitch that back to you.
And so any unused funds would be sent back to the city by, I think it's the last day of October, or 31st.
Okay.
So
it's nothing, oh, sorry, Brent, go ahead.
So one of the things that you can expect to see at your, I'm planning that your next meeting, so your October 5th meeting is kind of packaging all the CARES Act related funding and where we're spending our money. So part of that will contemplate receiving some of these funds back from the Carver County CDA. One of the things that's really taken quite a bit of my time, and I think frankly my colleagues' time throughout the state, is how to handle public safety spending and reimbursement related to that. The Department of Treasury and the Inspector General's office have different guidance related to how that should be tracked. And I mean, it's basically the exact opposite of one another. And so I've been in pretty regular contact with Steve McDonald at ABDO. The city of Shakopee has put together a pretty robust documentation strategy that we have access to. They've been willing to share. And so we might end up going down that road. But as an example, the Department of Treasury says to expedite kind of the handling of the pandemic, you don't need any documentation. To submit reimbursement and you're good to go. And the Inspector General says you have to, document. And so we're hoping that gets clarified in the next few weeks. But we might just end up recommending setting on caution and just really documenting this thing and working with some of our partners to get that information and then presenting it to the council at your meeting on the 5th.
Okay.
So I would expect, you allocated preliminary like $120,000 for the housing stability program. I would expect the lion's share of that to come back. But I also believe if the city submits for public safety dollars, that most of those funds could be used for that. I did send out an email. WeCab is requesting that the city allocate part of its CARES Act funds to them in the form of a grant. At this point, my response was we've allocated all of our dollars. But if that's something you want to consider on the 5th, if you have feedback for me on that now or in the future, we can consider that as well.
So I think consider that for the future is good. WeCap, being the service that they provide, I think is really a special thing. And I think if we can help fund that, being that they're operating on a free basis, I think if we could help them out so that people who might be suffering from setbacks due to the pandemic, that they can get rides to the doctor or wherever WeCab takes them. I do agree. I think Courtney, you said it seems, or maybe it was Aaron, but it's a little bit premature, I think, for those dollars for the residential. I think the new fiscal year next year, you'll start to see some of that coming more into play, but I guess it's out of our control at this point for the CARES Act funding. So we just have to let that go if there's nothing else we can do about it. But I do definitely support the WeCab of looking at doing some kind of grant funding for them in the future.
I would also support a grant to WeCab. Brent, did they have a dollar amount? Did they request a specific amount?
They did not.
Okay. I do, if we can use that money for the public safety reimbursement, as much as I would love to see this in our community and in the hands of folks, I think for me, the priority would be to use it for how it was kind of intended originally at face value and to reimburse cities for the expenses they're covering. So I think that would be my preference as we move forward, to make sure that we're covering the city's expenses first before we really try to figure out if we can make the housing program work. It sounds like we're helping our businesses, all 4 of them, but I'd love to get that public safety reimbursement if that's something that's qualifiable. Any other comments, thoughts? Glenn's shaking his head no. Christy's shaking no. I see no from Joy. I see thank you guys for all shaking. Thank you, Lori, for shaking very long. Well, it took me a while to find you. Erin, do you have what you need from us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Item 10.2, strategic plan, action plan update. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you see the spreadsheet on your screen?
Yes.
So I'm going to kind of run through these items. We've gotten to the point now where we're kind of ending the cycle on our strategic plan, and happy to report a lot of progress. Something new that we've been working on for the last several months, if not a year, is a partnership with the Lower Minnesota Watershed District. And they preliminarily committed to partnering with the city on the certified levy project to the tune of $100,000. And so there's still some T's to cross and I's to dot related to that, but we're going to be working with them on establishing that and kind of working to establish more of a ongoing partnership, whether it's with the certified levy or other issues impacting the watershed district in the city. As you know, we completed the study of franchise fees. It's crazy to think that we did that earlier this year. That seems like 5 years ago, if not longer. The reporting of finance information, a really, I think, interesting story. So ABDO has reached out to a third party, and they're working on kind of more of an interactive, actually, finance tool, and we're kind of unofficially a kind of a case study. They haven't established a relationship with ABDO, and they haven't really done the city stuff before. But there's a third party that ABDO is working with, and they're using our information to kind of create the template, if you will. And so we're really working with them on an ongoing basis. But if you remember back, frankly, to our strategic plan of talking to people in color, so like understanding that some people need data, some people need pictures, some people need a combination thereof. We're really trying to create a finance piece that kind of speaks to the language that people are most receptive to. And so hopefully that's something that we can show you in the early part of 2021. This has been delays related to the pandemic, so we're not as far along on that as we'd like to be, but we think the solution is very creative, so stay tuned for that. We've knocked out the items related to technology and our long-term financial plan, as well as the creating the infrastructure priorities. Really made quite a bit of progress, frankly, on just updating the long-term financial plan. We essentially did a delete all on the current plan and the infrastructure and then built it back up with our team. And so we've submitted that information to Steve, and we're going McDonald with Abdo, and we're going to be reviewing that, I would imagine, in the next few weeks, smoothing out the rough edges and then presenting that to the council for some comment. But we ended up taking out quite a bit that was kind of an antiquated maybe style of thinking based on kind of the new normals of our community and what our needs are related to infrastructure, staffing, and the like. So excited to get some council feedback on that. The community survey, I believe, was a success. So it would be something that we'll be using to inform our next strategic planning session. The concepts for communication support, we've explored that, and something that we probably haven't talked a whole lot about, but we've really relied quite a bit on Bolton and Mink. Nicole Schmidt is frankly a wizard when it comes to communications, and so it kind of bleeds into what you see in redefining or refining Carver's identity. The third piece of developing custom trademarks and messages, and Aaron's done quite a bit of work with this as well, but if you look at our construction updates, they all have kind of that same color scheme, same flow, same kind of context. And so that combination of Aaron's work with Nicole's graphics work, whether it be a construction project or a development review project, has really kind of honed that in. The website vendors, we've come quite a way, or we made quite a bit of progress on that. We're in a position to secure that website vendor, and we should have a launch in January with a pretty significant update for the council in October. Aaron, would you mind speaking to kind of the updates that you shared with me on the historic kiosks and the signs in the Fish and Wildlife area?
Sure. So for the kiosks, I reached out to Carver on the Minnesota, and then Annette gave a nice update at the Business Alliance meeting on Friday. We both would like to move forward with a kiosk, likely in Community Park, with the JCP project, but struggling with funding right now. Carver on the Minnesota has struggled to have money come in, with many of their fundraisers being postponed due to COVID. So continuing to work, but might be on pause for a minute while they navigate a little bit. And then hopefully we can come together and have one included with Community Park and the JCP project. At the Parks meeting last Monday on September 14th, we have started to think about our trail system and the fact that we have a lot of new trails in town that are exciting that maybe not a lot of people know about quite yet. So we are working as a group on identifying between 3 to 5 key trails that we want people to know about, think people would enjoy as we're continuing to stay closer to home. So one of them includes like the Hawthorne Ridge Loop with an oak tree component where you're experiencing 2 new trails, but we also spoke as a group about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, having them be our neighbor is such a huge asset that a lot of people frankly don't know about. So we're looking to increase both signage, but also just some knowledge for residents that just outside of downtown, there's this huge, great neighbor that we have. So we'll be working on that, I think, over the winter, trying to make some trail maps that are super easy to use, but also kind of fun to look at. So continuing some of our branding and marketing but we will move forward with some additional signage, both downtown with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but also in other areas highlighting some of the work that the Parks Commission has done recently.
Thank you, Erin. I covered the custom trademarks. I think we've seen the steering committee's work as relates to the JCP improvements that was signed off on by the council at a previous meeting. Public Services previously reviewed the cost for uniform street signs. That was kind of, at that point, the council directed us to just kind of sit on that one for a bit. So that's, if the council ever wanted to move forward with that, we have design ready to go. And then the consistency of amenities, we're doing that both with our private development groups, but also on city projects. And you can see that littered throughout the Jonathan Carver Parkway project when it comes to streetlights, retaining wall block, etc. So that was a quick overview, but just wanted to open up this first part to the council if there is any questions or comments that you'd like to share.
Go ahead, Christy.
Erin, for the historical kiosks, I know at least for a couple of the other ones, we received some grant funding. I believe it was from the Minnesota State Historical Society. Are those grants still available, and can we apply for funding from there?
I don't know, but I will find out. And if so, yeah, we can absolutely make an application.
Okay.
Any other questions, Joy? Anything from you?
I couldn't get my mute off. I love the idea of getting some kind of trail maps published for the city of Carver. That's always something I look for when I'm looking at another community and exploring parks and pathways. So that's fantastic. Please also don't forget about the connection into the U.S. Fish and Wildlife south of Carver Bluffs, which you can get to on Bluff Road. That's now pretty, I use it all the time because it's right in my neighborhood, but it's getting some good traction. And of course, there's that parking lot that's farther down Jonathan Carver Parkway.
To piggyback on that, Joy, at one point the county had done a huge mapping system and it was linked on their county website. I don't know if it's updated or still exists. But
I'm going to hunt for it.
Okay, yeah. But if it does still exist, we should try and link that somewhat accessible to our city website. I don't know if they have kept up on it. It may be outdated by this point, but it might still be there.
Yeah, I will look. I know Chaska's done a pretty good job, as well as some other surrounding Shakopee and some other cities. So,
yeah, the county did it. Again, I can't think of the name. If I do, I will. I will let you know.
Okay.
And then this kind of the second half of my presentation is just to kind of solicit some feedback from the council on our upcoming strategic planning session, and I'd probably use that word loosely, and maybe it doesn't need to be a session, maybe it's a series of conversations. One of the things that's kind of leading me to that is I think having a strategic planning session using this format would be challenging and maybe a little bit unproductive. It can be distracting. So I'd really like to get the team into the same space. So, considering, the mask mandate and COVID challenges, but then because there is some cohesion with our group, if the council would be interested in having staff facilitate, a visioning session, we had previously done where like each department kind of teed up some major themes for what they're dealing with currently and into the future. And so one of the ideas that I wanted to throw out there is just a series of conversations rather than maybe an 8-hour day where we kind of, Siri wanted to get involved there. We have a series of conversations where staff kind of can serve as a guide where we tee up issues that we think are relevant. Council would also have an opportunity to add to that list, but we'd kind of give not just a state of the city from community development's perspective or public services perspective or the clerk's office, but what our future challenges, whether it's related to transit or some type of infrastructure or communication barriers and using the community survey. And so maybe through a series of those conversations, we arrive at a kind of a destination rather than maybe our traditional method. And I'm not saying that this is something you need to decide tonight. I just kind of wanted to kind of open it up for conversation, considering we have some constraints. We do have more available space than we have in the past for having a properly social distance gathering, and who knows what the world looks like in 2021. But just wanted to kind of get some preliminary feedback on if I'm on the right track, or if you prefer another strategy related to the strategic plan.
So this was an idea that Brent and I spoke about this afternoon, and Brent, you know, my feedback is that I think you are on the right path. I think that the model that we've done in previous years worked, but I think it's time to mix things up a little bit, and I would love to see the department heads kind of show us what their anticipated needs are, and that we come together with a higher level list of strategic initiatives that we want to really tackle for the next couple of years. There's lots of big stuff coming up our way, you know, transportation, and what happens when the grant that we're using to pay for Southwest Transit service from Carver expires. What do we want to do with that? Is there anything where we can get more involved? Maybe have a council member be a liaison, or get appointed to some state something, or work more closely with the League of Minnesota Cities to help advocate on behalf of the city of Carver. Just kind of see just a little bit at a bigger picture type level. And I agree with Brent that I think it's important that we're all together for this and meeting face to face, because otherwise those meetings get long, and the temptation to multitask makes it really hard. Lori, any thoughts?
No, I like that idea too.
Glenn?
I'll be a traditionalist. I think getting together and banging heads together for the better part of 8 hours, it helps when you have interaction with all the city staff and the council and everybody that we bring into these strategic sessions. I think we can social distance, and who knows what the world's going to look like in February, March-ish, when we usually have it. So, I mean, everybody needs to bring ideas to the table. That's kind of where I'm going to focus.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Brent was saying, is the only thing that's different is just do it in more bite-sized chunks, perhaps, instead of one longer brain drain.
Sorry.
Session. Go ahead, Christy.
I actually like the full day, because I think being there for consecutive hours together, we really get deep down into things, where if we do it maybe in a series, we get started and then there's sort of a stop and then we get started again. I really like the focus that we have of having a full day, where we are just, like you said, not getting distracted by other things, knowing, okay, we've got 45 minutes left and, you know, it's on to the next. We're there all day. And I do like the in-person idea.
All right. Thanks, Christy. Joy?
I also support getting together in person. I do think that's incredibly valuable. I also, you know, I'm not traveling. My calendar's wide open. So I feel like it is easier for at least me personally to schedule maybe bite-sized chunks so we could deep dive into specific topics. I'm not sure what those topics look like. Maybe we start with an initial brainstorming, or everybody brings to the table, and then we divide up and say, okay, we're going to have 4 more sessions. They're going to be X hours each. What do we want to focus in on each of those sessions and really get into it? And maybe just so that we're not all having to be, you know, in a mask social distancing for 8 hours as a stretch, maybe we can do it in some smaller chunks. I also personally with the way that I work and I think, having a little bit time between some of those sessions might be helpful. Just as well, just to kind of get the brain flowing versus in one session. So that's my 2 cents.
Joy was saying that about having multiple sessions. I would be really fine if we maybe did like one morning and then another afternoon, just because of my work schedule. It's really all over the board for me, like, and when I'm available and when I'm not. So I would hate to miss it. It's easier for me to schedule out a chunk twice than it is to schedule out 8 different hours, you know, through weeks or whatever. So just a thought. I mean, obviously everyone has schedules to go by, but I know for myself personally, that would probably be easier.
That's a good suggestion though.
All right. Any other feedback? Brent, do you have what you need from us?
Yeah, I think I'll probably explore with some outlines and just bring them to the council. I think sometimes it's a little bit harder to have a full discussion if we're really talking big broad strokes, but I think everyone's kind of saying the same thing. I think we can check all the boxes that everyone brought up and get there. I think probably the biggest piece is, do you want it to be facilitated, or would you prefer staff to facilitate it? That's probably that, because I think in any event, and I think Richard Fersman did a great job, but I think it's probably good for the council to hear a different voice for facilitation. It's just a matter of how that's done. And I've facilitated sessions before. In thinking about it a little bit, the only drawback to facilitation is, what role does the council want me to have during it? Because if I'm facilitating, it's going to be harder for me to participate in probably some of the content, and maybe that's a good thing too. But again, something to think about. You certainly don't have to decide tonight, but I'll come back with some scenarios and get some feedback at a future meeting.
I can give you just quick feedback. I really like that idea of the different staff members, department heads presenting.
And I'm on the opposite. I think the impartialness of having someone come in and talk allows everyone else to just have their own voice in a working manner, rather than Brent, not that you're not impartial, but I mean, it's just, I think it'd be nice to have you working with us rather than leading at the same time, because then you don't get to have as much input, I don't think.
And I like the idea of having it non-facilitated. I think, it takes out the third party. If it's money that we don't have to spend, then we should go ahead and kind of go down that path. And I think, I guess I'm all for doing things differently this time around. And, if we have Brent or staff members tag team the facilitation, then we have the folks who know the city the best here. And just a quick update, Brent, your fly is in here now.
Say again?
Your fly is in here. The fly?
Oh, got it.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions?
I think we're done.
Okay, I think we are done. All right. Councilmember Communications. Joy, do you have anything?
No, a couple comments I guess I want to make. So we had a Carver Business Alliance meeting last week. It was great to have a couple of new participants this time, from representation from Lakeview Industries, from the Quick Trip coming. It's going to be real. We got the ribbon cutting on our calendar. So that's really exciting. It's exciting to also, talk about some new businesses and things that are coming. So that was good. And we had a lot of discussion about the CARES Act and the different funding and things like that too. So that was a good update too. I do want to commend the contractor that is working on the Bluffs street maintenance stuff. It has gone surprisingly well. I think with so minimal impact to residents here, I've never felt like I had an issue navigating my way through the development, and even the entrance that we said was going to be closed for several weeks is mostly open. So I got to applaud the contractors there just for working with residents and making it as low impact as possible, other than when that big truck that grinds up the road comes near my house and my house shakes. Other than that, it's been fantastic. So I got to commend that. And then I know in our last council meeting, the mayor asked for volunteers for next week for the Carver food distribution at the transit station. I hope there will be some communication. I haven't seen an event on Facebook or anything like that. I have seen some for some other ones, so I hope that is coming. Yes, I don't know, Courtney, if you know if whoever is putting it on is going to be posting any event or anything like that, advertising it.
Yeah, I know that, so it's Caitlin, I don't know her last name off the top of my head of the county, but they are working to advertise that, and they're kind of going through, she reached out to me early in the process and asked kind of what areas of town and what I thought would be the best area to help do that. It sounds like they're doing more kind of brick and mortar and hard copy posters places, but I'll just reach out to her as well. Thank you.
I know I've seen them post for other cities like Chaska or Victoria or Waconia or something like that. And
agreed.
So I just kind of was expecting and anticipating seeing something for Carver.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I feel like I haven't seen much on social either. So I will follow up with her.
All right, thank you.
All right.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Christy?
There we go. Yeah, I have a couple of things. So we had an HPC meeting last week and we welcomed David Pasco, our new member. So the HPC is at full capacity and ready to go. So that is really nice to see, and it's nice to see we're getting some people too who are from different areas of Carver. So that is really kind of fun to see the interest coming from not just the folks down here, but from all over the city. I have a few thank yous here. So I want to thank Public Works and what they've done the last 2 weekends for us. So the car show we had on September 12th, and that went very, very well. Paul, I want to give a thank you to him too. He was in contact with me to make sure that we had everything we needed for that morning. He did just a great job. Everything we asked for was there and done. So I want to say again, thanks to the Public Works Department for that. And then we had the Lions Pork Chop Dinner last Saturday night. And again, the city and the Public Works staff helped make sure that that was all ready to go with things that we needed. And then Katie, our daytime cop, also was there that evening. She did a fantastic job. And she's very personable with everyone, and they were really happy to see her and chat with her too, as she did traffic control. So we, as the Lions Club, want to thank the city for allowing us to host that in a different way, of course, than we're used to. We don't have the final numbers back, but we know that for sure that we did serve over 300 cars that night, or 300 people. Yeah. So it was very successful for, especially having never before, and the weather was perfect. So that was nice. But again, thanks to everybody who's helping out with all of these events in general in the last couple of weeks. So, and that's all I have for you.
All right. Glenn?
We had a planning commission meeting, and it was election of the commission chairs. Greg Riggs will be the chair, and Cindy Monroe, not being present, just has her leadership that just is amazing. She was elected vice chair, and then Aaron gave a invigorating communication regarding our zoning code update kickoff. So lots of exciting stuff coming from the planning commission. I just want to piggyback a little bit on what was said about the park, the signs for the parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It is hunting season coming up. I know there's bow hunters that are down there now. And so just when you're walking and enjoying the trails down in U.S. Fish and Wildlife, just be wary that there might be people in the trees. So with that, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Lori?
No update. We did have our Parks Commission meeting, and Aaron kind of gave some of the details of that already. So, and I also, along with Council Member McKnight, am looking forward to the map of our trails. So.
Thank you, Lori. Let's see. Just to piggyback on what Christy said, the Lions pork chop dinner was amazing. Someone in my house took one bite of his pork chop and was like, wow, this is one of the best pork chops I've ever had. So they know how to grill them down at the Lions, and it was different, but really well organized and speedy, and everybody was friendly. It was great. Joy kind of mentioned it, but if you haven't driven past Quick Trip, they have a building there now, which went up in like 2 days, so quickly that I was talking to Brent one day last week, and I was like, but they're not even above ground yet. And he's like, oh yeah, they have. You should drive past. So going really quick, and they're anticipating being open before the end of the year, which is super exciting. And then also, as Joy said, there's a free food distribution next Wednesday, September 30th at Carver Station. The distribution will be taking place from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We're doing pretty okay for volunteers, but if you are interested, we still have space for a few more volunteers if anybody is interested. And that is all that I have. Mr. Merrick, do you have anything?
Just a couple of brief things. Well, one of the items related to this City Hall that we're still working on is there's a issue that we're looking to have corrected related to the front stoop. And you may have noticed this, that sometimes there's standing water kind of in front of the front door and in front of like the kind of the village hall kind of doors. So they're going to be redoing that concrete. Dan Lannis has been involved in kind of redesigning that. So we're going to be very intentional about when that work gets done. We want it to be done before the snow flies, but we're also going to be very cognizant of the general election and making sure that we don't have any construction impacting that. And then related to that, I think Councilmember Mock had someone she knew or someone she knows experienced this. We've had problems with ice falling from that front awning. It's a kind of a metal awning, and so one of the things that we're going to be adding is some additional roof cleats there, so that'll stop the ice from coming down in that spot as well. So that, along with kind of dealing with some building humidity issues, are pretty much the only two remaining items of significance related to the City Hall construction project. Any questions on that before I move on? And then just kind of a scheduling piece. As the council may remember, I annually get in the ICMA annual conference, which is held at different locations throughout the country. Last year I was in Nashville. This year was planned to be in Toronto. As you're probably not surprised that it was canceled, but they're having a digital or virtual conference. So I'm going to be participating in that this week from this Wednesday through Friday. I'll be available by email and cell phone, etc. But I'm not going to be coming into the office. I'll be participating at home just so I am not distracted and can try to get the most out of the conference that I can. So just a scheduling piece, I'm still available, but you won't see me in City Hall on Friday. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I forgot to thank just Ryan Gill. What can we say about Gilly? Where he's going to be missed on the fire department. I thank him for his service. He's done a lot of hard work and very diligent about working with the fire department. And Gilly, you're going to be missed. Thank you for your years of service.
Well said,
Very
Glenn.
well said, Glenn. Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. All right.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
I believe that we've neglected to adopt or take action on the financial report from the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. So can I get a motion to, what do we need to do? Approve item 7.4, the financial report from the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll make that.
I heard Glenn with a motion.
I'll do.
Christy meant to second it. Motion by Councilmember Henry, second by Councilmember Mock. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
I, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Brent, for bringing that to my attention. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion by Councilmember Henry
A second.
and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? Mr. Mayor, can you do one final roll call vote tonight, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mock,
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
I, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Hi, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion passes. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.